You might have habits you've never thought much about. Little things you do every day that feel completely normal to you. But what if I told you that some of these habits, the ones that feel so ordinary you've never questioned them, might actually be signs that you experience childhood neglect? Not in the dramatic, obvious sense that everyone recognizes, but in the quieter ways that shape how you move through the world. The thing about childhood neglect is that it's often invisible. It doesn't always look like what we think it should look like. It's not always about being without food or shelter. It can be about emotional absence. It can be about having your needs ignored in subtle, consistent ways. And when that happens, you develop coping mechanisms, habits, ways of being that helped you survive then but might be holding you back now. Let's start with something that seems innocuous: over-apologizing. You catch yourself saying sorry for things that aren't your fault. You apologize for having an opinion. You apologize for taking up space. You apologize for existing, basically. Most people think this is just politeness, but psychologists recognize it as something deeper. When a child grows up in an environment where their needs are neglected, where their voice isn't heard or validated, they learn something crucial: it's safer to be small. It's safer to apologize preemptively, to assume blame, to make yourself less of a burden. A neglected child learns that their presence might be the problem, so they apologize for being present. As an adult, this habit remains. You apologize reflexively, even when there's nothing to apologize for. Here's another one: difficulty asking for help. You pride yourself on being independent. You can handle everything yourself. You rarely, if ever, ask anyone for anything. It feels wrong to burden people with your needs, and on the surface this looks like strength, self-reliance, maturity, but it's often the opposite. A child who experiences neglect learns that their needs won't be met anyway, so why ask? They learn that they can't depend on the people who are supposed to take care of them, so they stop asking. They become hyper-independent. As an adult, this looks like competence, but it's often rooted in fear. The fear that if you ask for help, you'll be rejected. The fear that your needs are too much. The fear that you'll be abandoned if you show vulnerability. Let's talk about people-pleasing. You go out of your way to make others comfortable. You prioritize other people's happiness over your own. You struggle to say no. You're the person everyone relies on. Again, this seems like kindness, but look deeper. A neglected child learns that love is conditional, that affection and attention must be earned. So they become attuned to what others need, what makes others happy, what will keep others from leaving. They become expert at reading a room, anticipating needs, molding themselves into whatever shape is required. They've learned that their value comes from what they can do for others, not from who they are. Here's a subtle one: hypervigilance. You're always alert. You notice small changes in people's moods or body language. You're scanning the environment constantly, looking for signs of danger or rejection. You might not even realize you're doing it. It feels like normal awareness to you. But hypervigilance is a trauma response. A neglected child lives in an unpredictable environment. They don't know when they'll be fed, when they'll get attention, when they'll be safe. So they become hyper-aware. They learn to read every microexpression, every tone of voice, looking for clues about what's coming. This kept them safe as a child. But as an adult, it's exhausting. You're always on edge, always preparing for the worst. Let's discuss emotional numbness, or difficulty expressing emotions. You don't cry much. You feel disconnected from your feelings. You might even pride yourself on being rational, unaffected by the drama of life. You see people who are emotional as weak. But emotional numbness is often a protective mechanism. A child who expresses sadness or fear in a neglectful home learns that their emotions aren't acknowledged or comforted, so they suppress them. They learn that feelings are a waste of time because no one's coming to help anyway. As an adult, this detachment might look like strength, but it's often disconnection. And disconnection has consequences. It affects your relationships, your decision-making, your ability to connect with yourself. Here's another pattern: perfectionism. You have impossibly high standards for yourself. You're never satisfied with your work. You're driven, ambitious, but also constantly critical of yourself. You can't relax because there's always something that needs to be better, needs to be fixed. Perfectionism often stems from childhood environments where love was conditional, where approval was rare and criticism was common. A neglected child learns that if they're perfect enough, smart enough, good enough, maybe they'll finally get the attention and love they deserve. As an adult, you're still chasing that approval. You're still trying to be perfect enough. But perfect is an impossible standard, so you're always failing. Let's talk about people with a pattern of choosing unavailable partners. You're attracted to people who are emotionally distant, unavailable, or who need to be fixed. You invest heavily in these relationships while neglecting your own needs. You're drawn to the challenge of winning their love and approval. This is a direct reenactment of your childhood. You grew up with unavailable caregivers. You learned that love means pursuing someone who can't quite give you what you need. That pattern became normal to you. So as an adult, you recreate it. You find partners who are emotionally unavailable, and you convince yourself that this time, if you love them hard enough, they'll change. If you're good enough, you'll finally get the love you were denied as a child. Here's one that's often overlooked: difficulty relaxing or feeling like you need to earn rest. You feel guilty when you're not productive. Leisure feels wrong somehow. You need to be doing something, achieving something, to justify your existence. Even vacations make you anxious because you feel like you're wasting time. A neglected child learns that their needs come last, their rest comes last, their comfort comes last. Their value is tied to what they produce or what they can do. So as an adult, you can't just be. You have to do. Constantly. The idea of resting without earning it first feels irresponsible, selfish, wrong. Let's discuss boundaries, or rather the lack of them. You don't have clear boundaries. People take advantage of you repeatedly. You say yes when you mean no. You share too much with people who aren't trustworthy. You let people treat you poorly and you rationalize it. A neglected child doesn't learn what healthy boundaries look like because their own boundaries were violated constantly. Their needs were ignored. They weren't taught to value themselves enough to protect themselves. So, as an adult, you don't know how to say no. You don't know how to keep people out. You let people cross lines because you were never taught that your space and your peace matter. Here's something psychological research has clearly identified: a tendency to minimize your own pain or struggles. When someone asks how you are, you always say fine. Even when things are difficult, you downplay it. You make light of serious problems. You don't want to be a burden with your problems. This comes directly from neglect. A child whose emotional needs are ignored learns that their pain doesn't matter, that talking about it is pointless, that no one's coming anyway. So you minimize. You learned early that the world doesn't want to hear about your struggles, so you keep them to yourself. Let's talk about shame. Not guilt. Shame is different. Guilt is when you feel bad about something you did. Shame is when you feel bad about who you are, and shame often comes from childhood neglect. When a child's needs are consistently unmet, they internalize a message: there's something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of care. I'm not valuable enough. That shame becomes part of how you see yourself. It's not something you consciously think. It's just background radiation that colors everything: your self-image, your relationships, your choices. Here's another pattern: seeking validation constantly. You need external approval to feel okay about yourself. You might overshare on social media. You seek reassurance frequently. You're devastated by criticism. You feel your worth fluctuate based on other people's reactions to you. A child who is neglected doesn't receive consistent validation. They don't get mirrored back that they're okay, that they're worthy, that they matter. So as an adult, they seek this validation everywhere: from social media, from romantic partners, from bosses, from friends. Anywhere external, because they never received it internally from the people who were supposed to provide it. Let's discuss fear of abandonment. You have intense anxiety in relationships. You're terrified of being left. You might chase people who are pulling away. You might stay in relationships that are unhealthy because the fear of being alone is worse than the pain of staying. This is textbook childhood neglect response. Emotional or physical abandonment by caregivers creates a core wound. I am not worth staying for. As an adult, this fear drives you. You'll compromise yourself, diminish yourself, accept poor treatment, anything to prevent the abandonment that confirms this core belief. Here's one that surprises people: excessive talking or sharing. You talk a lot, sometimes without pausing. You share personal information readily. You might not even realize you're dominating conversations or oversharing with people you've just met. Sometimes this comes from a child who had to work hard to get their parents' attention. They learned that if they make enough noise, take up enough space, they might finally be noticed. So they talk. They share. They try to be interesting enough, engaging enough to hold someone's attention, because silence means being ignored. Let's discuss emotional eating, substance use, or other numbing behaviors. You use food, alcohol, shopping, work, or other activities to manage difficult feelings. You don't really address the emotion, you distract from it instead. A child who experiences neglect doesn't learn healthy emotional regulation. No one's there to help them process feelings, so they find their own ways to soothe themselves, to numb out, to escape. Those coping mechanisms become habits. As an adult, you still reach for them when emotions get too big. Here's something important: difficulty setting or pursuing your own goals. You don't really know what you want. You pursue things because they're expected, because others want you to, because they seem practical. But you're not deeply connected to your own desires and dreams. A neglected child's own wants and needs don't matter much, so they don't develop a strong sense of what they actually want. They become attuned to what others need and want, but disconnected from their own inner compass. As an adult, you might succeed at things that don't actually fulfill you because you never learned to ask yourself what would. Let's talk about something more subtle: difficulty being truly seen or known. You have a public self that you present to the world, but privately, you feel unknown. Even in close relationships, you don't feel fully understood. There's a part of you that remains hidden, protected. A neglected child's real self, their feelings, their struggles, their authentic needs, goes unseen. So they learn to hide it. They learn that the real version of them isn't acceptable or worthy of attention. So they create a version that's more acceptable, more likable, more useful. But that means the real them remains unseen and unknown. Here's something many people with childhood neglect struggle with: difficulty trusting. Not just trusting others, but trusting yourself. You second-guess your own judgment. You don't trust your gut. You need others to validate your perceptions and decisions. A child whose needs were neglected couldn't trust their caregivers, so they couldn't trust that what they needed mattered or would be provided. That breaks something in how you trust yourself. If the people who were supposed to take care of you didn't, why would you trust your own ability to take care of yourself? Now, here's what's important to understand. Having these habits doesn't mean you were severely neglected. Childhood neglect exists on a spectrum. Some of these habits might be more pronounced in you than others. You might recognize some of them strongly and others only slightly. The fact that you're noticing these patterns is actually the first step toward healing. Because here's the truth: you developed these habits for a reason. They helped you survive a difficult childhood. They were adaptive then, but they might not be serving you now. And recognizing that is powerful, because if you develop these patterns, you can also develop new ones. Healing from childhood neglect isn't about blame. It's about understanding. It's about recognizing that the way you relate to yourself and others was shaped by your early experiences, and then gently, consciously choosing something different, building new habits, learning to validate yourself instead of seeking it elsewhere, learning to ask for help, learning to rest without earning it, learning that you're worthy simply because you exist, not because of what you do or produce. If you're recognizing yourself in these patterns, be gentle with yourself. You learned these ways of being because you had to. They're not character flaws, they're survival mechanisms. And now that you understand them, you can begin to rewrite them.